Hey guys, welcome back to the Church of the Harvest Parenting Podcast. Pastor Royce here with my amazing wife. Her name is Jenny.
It is.
How's it been going?
It's going. It's busy.
It is busy.
So busy.
It is busy. It is July.
Yeah.
You made it through halfway through the summer. Your kids are still alive. Our children are still alive. That's great. It's good. Hopefully all of you guys are having a great time this summer. It's been a very interesting summer.
To say the least.
Summer 2024, very interesting.
Yes.
We knew that 2024 was going to be interesting. Didn't know how. Finding out rather rapidly.
Yeah.
And part of that is there's been a lot of amazing changes, a lot of very quick changes as well alongside that. I try to make this podcast like really general. Like making it not so much like Church of the Harvest specific. So kind of like in that theme, because we are going to get into a little bit of the weeds on some of the things that we have going on that are very practical, especially not only to just parents in general, but specifically, church parents of our church. But that being said, I'm kind of curious on like your lens on this, because we're doing all this work at the church to make church a big deal, to make church really fun for kids, but not. My thing is like I love having fun with kids. I think Jesus found an incredible way through fun, but I also I'm not a fan of fun being the primary thing. Maybe that's because I'm older and grumpier. Possibly, I don't know, but I also know within within Christianity, it's kind of interesting because it's not always fun. Like following God is always amazing. It's always incredible. It's always an adventure, but it's not always fun. But all that being said, how important do you think things like frequency and like church attendance are for families and kids specifically? Maybe. What are your thoughts there?
Oh gosh, I would love everyone to be here all of the time. I mean, not like Monday through Friday or anything like that, but Sundays. We're super fortunate in that our kids have had that. It's a joke, but also very true facts that Charlotte was born on a Wednesday and she was here the following Sunday.
Sure.
She knows nothing else. And because of that, this place is like home to her. It's comfortable and these people are her family. And so it's always a good time for her.
Right.
And it's not awkward and none of those other weird church things. So there's that piece of it, but there's also just the community and the friendships and relationships that you build, especially with kids, like within their own age group. And then, as those families connect, they can spend time together outside of church. There's just so much that can happen when we're seeing each other more frequently. I love that our oldest daughter, who is going to be 17 tomorrow, has friends that she's had in this church since preschool.
Right.
And they hang out. They still go to church together. They go get ice cream. They're friends. And
teenage shenanigans.
But in a good way. It's like good, clean fun that I am just so thankful for.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, there's a lot of talk around like frequency sometimes, and I think sometimes that conversation kind of misses a little bit of the point, because I think commitment to community is really the most important, and I think something that's inferred from commitment is like a consistency. This thing is a constant priority and value, whatever this thing is, and you can kind of insert whatever fits the actual value system of a family. And I always get kind of tripped up because I look at things like big picture wise. Like I've worked with students, we've worked with students for 15, 16 years, which is a long time, especially with students. Like it's a very fast-paced time of life and very hyperbolic in ways. And so we've seen a lot of people not just graduate high school. We've seen a lot of that. But, then it's like, people don't just slip into the ether.
Nope.
Like, they become adults, and they make decisions, and the decisions that they make are highly impacted by the values, not that were said as values, but that were lived as values.
Yeah.
And I find that piece to be a point of focus whenever I kind of zoom out and I'm like, okay, I love interest-based, like, interests, like hobby-based interests or maybe competitive-based interests. That's a huge one in, the side of the world that we live in, which is the, Johnson County side of the fence. It seems like everybody's like really competitive. And
competitive baseball, competitive volleyball.
And it's like, and be the best.
Academics.
All that's great and stuff, but man, it's really complicated whenever a person's trying to form and assess their value as an individual, because we don't tend to think of competition and value as being things that are inextricably linked together, but they are. And the problem with that is that, like, when I've said this probably a million times in so many different ways, but when your value is linked to your performance, how do you fail well? And if you can't fail, then you can't really learn, because we learn a little bit through success, but I'll be honest, it's very little.
Right.
And it's so much more dynamic whenever we don't succeed. And I say don't succeed because failure then kind of falls into this weird gray area, because is it failure or is it failure to learn? Because in my book and experience in life, it's only failure when you fail to learn. So if you do something and the outcome doesn't land the way that you wanted it to, whether it be an academic test or a game or whatever it may be, that doesn't mean that you failed. It gives you a lot to learn from.
I think it gives you an opportunity to try something else.
And so all that is just to say, like, I find the competitive landscape of what committed communities we have to be lacking. Like, not only that, I mean, it's not just my opinion, right? Like, the studies come out every year. They're not studies, they're just statistics around suicides of D1 and D2 athletes.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that there's things that fall within our culture that just don't satisfy. If you are really nerdy like me and you spend a lot of time in the book of Ecclesiastes, which covers the life and the journey of King Solomon, you're going to find pretty quickly from a biblical standpoint, there's nothing that's tangible or somewhat intangible on this earth that's going to actually satisfy. But one thing that I get really specific about is that also means church. Yeah. Like, you can be a churchian and not a Christian.
Okay.
That's a new term.
I hear you. A churchian.
Well, it's because, like, when you worship the culture of church, or you worship the style of a particular church, or the practices of, that becomes, it can become, I'm not saying that it does, and sometimes we have to kind of like go through one door to get to the other, but I feel like we can at times make idols out of things that God meant to be good things in our lives. Yeah. And I think that's one of the oldest tricks of the enemy, is he'll take a good thing and turn it into a God thing, which automatically makes it a bad thing. And so when church becomes that thing, when we worship the church, or we worship the preacher, or we worship the style, or our customs look a whole lot more like imitating a person that we can see versus imitating Jesus. Yeah. And then there's that weird excuse that happens. It's like, no, like, because Paul said, imitate me as I imitate Christ. But he also said that to people that he was rebuking for most of that letter. So it's almost like an inference of immaturity. And I think as long as, like, we know the season that we're in, that's okay. And there is absolutely a season, but we just shouldn't stay in the season of, like, imitating someone else. Yeah. And so for me, it's like, okay, that's where the church conversation gets weird. Because, yeah, church is important, but it's also specific. Like, it's not church just for church's sake. I think everybody's been in the situation where a kid didn't want to go to church.
Oh, yeah.
And they were just, like, adamant about that. And then
I've only seen it a few times.
Right. It's
just
like,
a couple.
Okay, so you take the kid to church. Like, sometimes something happens. Like, their attitude changes or something. Like, cool. But never in the history of ever have you just, like, thrown a kid who absolutely does not want to be at church and that went, like, over and over again, and that just goes really good.
Yeah.
Like Billy Graham said it, famously. He said, like, you can't become a car by sitting in a garage.
Yeah.
And you don't become a Christian just by going to church. You become a Christian by an encounter with God, which, by all means, hopefully that happens in a church. Like, I think it should happen in churches. Like, that's what our aim is with your kids every week.
Yeah.
But it's also not just this magical thing that's going to happen, which brings me to maybe my second point about that, which is the consistency of church when it leaves the building.
Exactly. Yep. That encounter can't just be, it only happens at church, because that's not true.
Yeah, and I think people blow this out of proportion in a weird way, because it's like, does that mean that I like follow all the same cultural idioms that I do at church? And it's like, maybe that's what works for you. But I know, like, at least in our home, it's like, no, it's just authenticity.
Yeah.
And authenticity means, like, if you're not somewhere with a particular thing, that you own that. Like, you don't have to, like, wear it as a badge.
No, and you don't have to lean into it or accept it if you're not in a great place.
Definitely not.
But be honest.
Yeah. I mean, be honest to the degree which is wise, but there's always a degree of honesty that's necessary for authenticity. I think that's one of the biggest things. It's like, no one has to be perfect, but I think you do have to be authentic. But that goes into, like, a whole nother conversation about knowing yourself, I think. In a way, it's like, because in order to be authentic, you really have to, like, know yourself. And to know yourself, you have to quit lying to yourself.
That's good choice.
Which can be tough for, a lot of people, because a lot of people, they want to, like, fake their way into a way of living and a way of life, and sometimes that's what happens at church. And I think that's really complicated for a lot of people too. And so all of that to just say, like, there's this level where God meets you, and God meets us in our most authentic spaces. And so whenever our kids see us, here at our church, we do family ministry. So for those of you who may not be familiar, roughly 25% of churches in America are part of Family Ministries. It's not just a philosophically different approach to spiritual development, especially within adolescence, but it's much more of a biblical focus. It's not broken down into kids and youth, which are oftentimes identified by children's pastors and youth pastors. It's a family dynamic that seeks first and foremost to empower the home and to be a supplement. So the church is a supplement to the home.
Yes.
So as a family ministries pastor myself, as my wife is a children's director, we're supplementational, but also secondary to the parents.
Absolutely.
And the reason is because that's biblical. But in Deuteronomy chapter 6, God makes it very clear that we are, as mothers and fathers, we are to be the ones who take responsibility and ownership for the spiritual development of our children. In America, we got kind of complicated because we were like, okay, teenagers are complicated. And there was a little bit of an inferiority complex, like a little bit of an insecurity thing that happened where it was like, okay, we're the experts. And let me just, for if anyone doesn't know, if you're a mom of a person, or if you're a dad of a person, you're the expert.
Yeah.
Do you feel confident about that all the time? Most of the time? No, not at all. Same, actually. We're in the exact same boat. We have a daughter who's going to be 17. We have a daughter who's 11. And every day I've never done this day with you. I don't know how to do this day with you. I need your help. We're going to have to work together. We're on the same team. God's good. Let's move.
Yeah.
And that's just how it goes. It doesn't matter how confident we feel based on maybe a certain practice or a way of parenting skills even. Like, those things are great. I love all that. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm confident that Jesus is Lord. I'm confident that God put me in the position that he put me in to be their father.
Yeah.
And that God put her in the position that he put her in to be their mother. And he put us there in those humans' lives uniquely to represent Jesus as accurately as anyone is ever going to represent Jesus to them. And that means I have to be honest with what I know about Jesus.
Yeah.
I can't represent something that I don't know. But I think all of that to just say, like, you don't have to have confidence in your ability. You just have confidence in what God has done, where he's put you, and then lean into the communities with a commitment and with a consistency that is appropriate to the value of what it can give. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze with sports? Is the juice worth the squeeze with academics? Is the juice worth the squeeze with fill in the blank? Like, is the juice worth the squeeze with church? That to me is a very complicated question, because it seems like there's always been this two different definitions of church. There's the cultural definition, and then there's the biblical definition. And is the juice worth the squeeze with the cultural definition of church? I would say no.
Yeah.
I would say no. If it's just a cultural thing, and it's not a biblical thing, if it's just a tradition thing, and it's
going through the motions,
yeah,
ticking off the box.
If it's not a spiritual thing, if it's a religion thing and it's not a relationship thing, I'd say no. I'd say that all the evidence points towards all the really, I mean, even biblically speaking, it's, you know, the Bible's very clear. Like, it says that per the Jews, the at the time, that represented God in a very cultural type of way, that the Gentiles despised God because of their practice.
Yeah.
And, you know, I work with young people, and life is ripe with criticisms. I mean, and even in the culture, like, it seems like every other day news breaks of, you know, some insecurity that's getting unmasked, or some abusive individual over here, or someone did this over there. So just these atrocious things, because it loses this emphasis. It becomes about this cultural power thing, authority thing. I don't know what. It gets really weird. Yeah. I think one of the best ways, and I'll kind of end on this note, we'll move into something a little bit more practical to the exact time that we're in, because we got to hit some of that. But Pastor David actually talks about this, but I haven't heard him say it in quite a while.
Okay, I'm ready.
But in the Old Testament sacrificial system, from the time that the Ark of the Covenant was no longer in the Holy of Holies within the tent of meeting, there was nothing there to take up the sacrifices. So every year, Yom Kippur, they would, on the Day of Atonement, they would go and they would take sacrifices into the Holy of Holies, but there was no presence there. And so because there was no presence there was nothing to burn up the offering. Yeah. And so by the time you get to Jesus and you get to Passover and Jesus crucified on the cross, and it says that he tore the veil, he tore the curtain that was in the temple. First of all, like, that's like a 80-pound curtain. It's not like you couldn't just go in there, because it was the place where the presence of God was supposed to be. Yeah. But it was ministry without presence.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the picture is.
It's religion without presence. And what is there to take away the sacrifice? Nothing. Yeah. And so what happens? It just rots. Yeah. And it stinks. And it's gross.
Yes.
And that's what religion is without presence. Yeah. And I'm not saying religion in the sense of pure and undefiled religion is this, to take care of the widows and the orphans.
You're talking like...
I'm just talking about going through motions and having ritualistic things that we do and rules that aren't attached to the heart of God and aren't attached to his presence. Parenting, rule-based parenting is crazy in my opinion. It's just wow. But presence-based parenting, that's a whole different animal. And doesn't mean that every time the kids get in my car, there's worship music going on. That's your car. It's not my car. I like the Gorillas.
Yes, we know.
But anyway, but I do think, all that being said, that the authentic nature of the commitment to not just going to a thing, being the church. Yeah. Being the church, finding a body to connect to that connects that reality to you and that God's called you to. Because the other thing we haven't talked about at all in this is, like, what church are you called to? And this is a pretty sensitive subject for a lot of people, because unfortunately, depending on the culture that you live in, we can be child-led to churches as opposed to Spirit-led to churches.
Yeah.
Because it's like, where do my kids like to go? Where do they have activity? And that's all good. Like, that should be a part of the experience. But ultimately, like, I remember when we came here. When we came to I've never known how to do church shopping. That was a term that I got introduced to as a pastor, but I didn't know what that was.
You're going to have an honest moment here, aren't you?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I didn't, like, when we moved here from Texas, like, a long time ago, 14 years ago, and we'd been at one church ever. I got saved in that church. We got married in that church, like, but we had only been there for a couple years. And so then we moved up here. We were going to a different church because I had connections there, and, like, we kind of knew some of the people there, but not really. Mm-hmm. And it was it was a big church, and we came from a pretty small church at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, telling Jenny, I was like, I like it here, it's fun, but I don't feel called here.
Yeah.
Like, let's go to this other church. And at the time, our church was smaller. It was way smaller. It was like 250 people.
Well, I don't know.
And I didn't know what the kids' programming was like.
That wasn't even a thought.
No, like and staying wasn't like, I don't remember asking Chloe like how church was. Like, I'm sure that I did, but
I'm sure we asked, who did you play with?
Yeah, probably. That's what we still ask to this day.
Who did you play with?
But it was like, no, there was a moment where God just met us where we were, and we were like, oh, we're home, which was such a relief. It was I was like so like anxious in a way because we came from such a great church, and those are, sometimes hard to come by. And we'd never done this before.
Yeah.
But we didn't, like, it wasn't based on, like, where do my kids... I love that. I mean, I think that should inform things. But ultimately, it's like, is God calling us to this place? And one of the ways that you can know if God's calling you to a place is if you see something that needs, like, you have a conviction about it changing. It seems crazy.
What is that? If you know better, do better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my call to... I didn't want to be a part of church whenever I got saved. Just not full disclosure.
I asked if you were going to have an honest
I didn't know if it was that moment. I didn't know what you're talking about. No, yeah. When I got saved, I was like, cool, me and Jesus, we're good. Let's go. This is awesome. And he's like, go to church. And I was like,
no, thank you.
I was just like, I have a dysfunctional family. I don't need another one. Thank you very much. And the call of the Lord was just, if you know better, go be better. Like, and I was like, what am I going to do with that? So I went, and I learned in a lot of ways I didn't know better. Because it's kind of funny at times once you get into things, you realize there's a reason why it works that particular way.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of different things that I didn't know better. Mm-hmm. And then, you know what? There were a few things in there that I got to say, hey, what about this?
Yeah.
And it went better. It went better. It was great. And you know what? The church needs... And I think in seasons like this, the church needs people who are committed to making the church an accurate representation of what heaven on earth is like, which is what the church is called to be.
Yeah.
The church isn't just called to be a place where we gather on Sunday and we sing fun songs, or we have a concert, or we do youth group 6.0, like we do t-shirt cannons and acrobatics from the ceiling. I don't know what people do I don't know what kind of production happens. I don't know. It's Youth Group 6.0 is what I call it. But it's a place where heaven really touches earth in a profound way, like in an individual way and in a corporate way. Like, that's what the church is called to be. It's actually a metamorphosis of the earth into heaven. And that's what we get the opportunity to do, but we get to do it in the lives of young people, old people, middle-aged people like myself.
All the people.
All the people. With people and things and places, and bring peace,
Yeah.
which is a crazy thing, especially in our season. And I think the point that I'm trying to make is, like, it happens because people get committed to that reality. And they get committed to it when they're here at the church, and they get committed to it when they're home being the church.
Yeah.
And it's no one is on the bench. Everyone's on the field. Everyone has a spot. Everyone's a part of the body. Everyone has a piece to play.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, here at our church, we're making some awesome changes.
Yeah.
Speaking of, if you know better, be better. Not that we know any better, but we have a lot of amazing people that have amazing ideas and are helping us a ton to refresh, not just refresh, but a full makeover of all of our children's spaces, which is so cool. So for those of you that don't know, our building was a 20,000 square foot facility that we added another 20,000 square foot onto. So the current space that is all the Family Ministries spaces is the previous, the first 20,000 square, the OG building. And we use those spaces. And so going through and doing a full makeover means bringing those spaces into pristine condition. Yeah. And being very specific to the age ranges, maybe not very specific. That's
intentional.
Very intentional, yeah, to the kiddos that are typically in those spaces on Sunday mornings, so that we can provide amazing services to you guys and to your guys' kiddos, so that, really, I think for me, one thing is like, I want kids to not just be excited to the place that they come into, but the way they experience that heaven on earth that I was just describing, because no one's exempt from it.
You go back to like the fun thing and the word that kept coming to my mind of like, I don't need it to be cannons. I don't need it to be acrobats. I need it to be engaging. I need it to be something that draws kids in, that says, wow, this is God and this is real and he loves me. That's what it needs. Yeah,
well, I mean, that's always there. But the way that, like, I think if you think about like, not that saying that I'm necessarily like a fan of cathedrals. But if you go and look at some of the most amazing cathedrals in the world, they took hundreds of years to build. Generations and generations. And the
lot of them are still standing.
Exactly.
And beautiful.
And the reason that they did that and they were committed across that span of time was because they were giving their best to God. They were really artisanally crafting the environment. Now, there's opinions on this, all right? There's, the Protestant side of the board went purposefully plain. Like, if you didn't know, then there's no other. That's why there's no stained glass and, really ornate things in Protestant churches, is because after the Reformation, people kind of went away from that because the building became the thing that got glorified. Back to my earlier point about churchianity. But you like that, don't you?
It is just really...
It rings a little bit. So, but anyway... Very
original.
There's this nature of like, God's presence is here. And everything that's in this space, the people who... Let's be honest, like, people are where God represents himself the most. We are the only thing that wears the image and likeness of God. It's not found in anything else yet. Romans chapter 1, that God's invisible qualities are shown through that which is visible, so that no man would be with excuse, or no one would have an excuse. And so there is this combination of the two, but it's for the experience, it's for the exposure, and it's for the encounter of God's presence into lives, because that's what changes things. That's what changes families. That's what changes kids. That's what transforms hearts and lives. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to do. We're doing a lot of really fun stuff to make that happen. We're engaging new service structures. We'll have all these new spaces. We're going to have some modified services leading up to that point. Losing during this time, like we don't have access to the spaces, which is it's whatever. It's 4 weeks. It's a month, and we're going to do some fun stuff.
It's an adventure.
It's kind of like if I don't know if when you were a kid, like if the electricity ever went out and you guys just went camping. You modified. And some of you're adults now, and you didn't even realize the electricity was out. You just thought you were sleeping in a tent in the backyard with parents, and you thought it was the coolest thing ever because you were taking a camping trip. And it's kind of like that, with the kids. We're gonna have different spaces set up for them. Just to make it real brief, I did a video for it yesterday, but all the infants and toddlers are gonna be on the north side of the building, which is where our main auditorium is, and all the preschool and elementary kids, so everyone else, is going to be on the south side of the building, which is where the Family Ministries entrance is, if you happen to be around us. But we're going to have an awesome time with it. We're going to have fun with it. I'm sure we'll make more videos as time goes on. And do all the fun things. And then we'll unveil it. And we have a really fun plan for that, too. August, if you're part of our church, August 18th is our promotion Sunday. That's our targeted promotion Sunday. Everything is subject to change. Jesus could come back tomorrow and we're all in glory. Let's do that instead. But if he tarries, August 18th is our goal for promotion Sunday, and we'll have a treat for you. That's what I'll say. Love you guys so much. Thank you guys. Keep your chin up. You're doing an amazing job. Love you.